Welcome, my friends, to another edition of the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. I admit it, I'm a financial planning geek, and I'll share with you why. I received an email today from Vanguard. They do this assessment every year of their projections for financial planning scenarios and whatnot, investment returns, and just things that their consumers need to be looking out for when it comes to financial planning. And I received that in the email today. And I want to share it with you because I think the Vanguard piece is above and beyond one of the best in the industry. JP Morgan does a thing annually on investment returns, and that's fine. But as I say all the time, investments are down here. Financial planning is up here in the overall importance level. So if we're going to focus solely on investments, that's fine. But what I like about Vanguard is they focus on investments plus some of the other financial planning topics as well. And this, I guess, it just came out the other day, the 10th. So Vanguard's roadmap to financial security, a framework for decision-making in retirement. And I love this stuff. They do a great job at Vanguard. They do have reports at the beginning of the first quarter of the year, what their projection rate of returns are and stuff. And they also follow up with reports like this in terms of financial security. So Vanguard is all free. Just get on their list. It's fantastic. Should you use Vanguard for financial planning? I don't think so at this stage. I think they're thinking about going that route. At this stage, it's just all investment allocation and a Monte Carlo analysis based on your spending, but it's not real true in-depth financial planning. Would not shock me if they're allowed that at some point. The problem with any of these big firms, though, is that it's got to be boilerplate. It's got to be. And the simple reason is because they're dealing with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. If they have anyone specific over here versus over there or versus over there, how are they going to police that stuff up? There's just no way. And so these big firms are good at boilerplate financial planning, off the shelf. Their models will tell you to do this. Friends, that's not acceptable. You don't need a boilerplate financial plan for you. Yes, the average consumer might, but you are not the average consumer. You are you, John and Jane. I am Josh and Charlotte, so on and so on. The Josh and Charlottes of the world, we don't need boilerplate, one-size-fits-all financial planning. Now, does that mean Vanguard doesn't have anything to offer? Not in the least. And I'm going to share with you, their investments are great, but I'm going to share with you right here, some of the literature they have is just fundamentally sound. And you should read it. You should follow it. And, if you need guidance specific to your investments, man, by all means, use Vanguard. All right. So let's click on the PDF that we got here, the white paper, and I'll share it with you because it's fantastic. Vanguard's roadmap to financial security. And I don't think you can see my face now. On a PDF, it doesn't allow me to show you my face. It just does one or the other. So I got my ugly mug off there for the time being, but we'll come back here shortly. Vanguard's roadmap to financial security. Let's go down and talk to them about this. I want to point retirement is complex and face of often competing goals and numerous risks. The choice can be overwhelming, leaving many retirees unsure where to begin. Okay, that's great. They got this nice little chart there. I just want to kind of get into the crux of the info that they have here. Develop a plan and avoid risks. I get that. I want to show you something here that's absolutely. They do run just real quick. I will share with you this. The projections and other information generated by the Vanguard Capital Markets model regarding the likelihood of various investment outcomes are hypothetical in nature, do not reflect actual investment results, and are not guarantees. Just remember that. Distribution of return outcomes from the VC, Vanguard Capital Management, are derived from 10,000 simulations for each modeled asset class. Simulations are as of September 30, 2017. So, they're talking thousands and thousands of models of simulations. None of these will come true. None of them will be false. We just don't know. But at the end of the day, it gives you what I like about it. It gives you a rule of thumb. And, I hate rules of thumb, but it does give you a starting point in which to analyze your future projections in terms of your rates of return and things of that nature and the markets. Because remember, retirement planning, we're going to identify the gap that we need from an income stream. We have our expenses. We subtract by our primary insurance amount, divide what's left over by 0.04. That gives us our liquid net worth. That's a 3-question retirement plan. What do we need? How much we get from Social Security? Divide the gap by 0.04, and that gives us our liquid net worth. And that's exactly what we're going to try to figure out with projected investment returns. will our liquid net worth satisfy what we need here? So I want to go down here because I thought I could just go to page down, but it won't let me do that. I want to show you the returns that they have going forward. Bear with me just a second, guys. This thing is moving slowly because there's a couple things I need to point out. 3 major things I want to point out on the Vanguard stuff. All right, market risk. All right, keep going down. Market risk is this. There we go. Finally, thanks for hanging in there. All right, so here's the market risks. Market risks are the likelihood of your portfolio underperforming relative to what you need to happen. And as you can see here, 10-year returns, 20-year returns, and even 5-year returns is fine, but let's just focus on the 10. A global equities. Global is everything, U.S. included, emerging markets, developed countries, everything. So global is everything. Global bonds is U.S. bonds, corporate bonds, Singapore bonds, the whole thing. So global just means it's all encompassing. All right. Sometimes we'll see global ex-U.S. That means it's everything other than the United States. Sometimes if it's just a world market, that may or may not be global. If you're looking for what to say ex-U.S., if it says ex-U.S., that means it's everything except the United States. So global or world, if it's all inclusive, it will not say ex-U.S. So again, these are going to be global, and how they figure out global. Global equities and global bonds represent market caps weighted. So cap weighted, like the S&P 500, broad exposure to these asset classes. They're talking about the FTSE here, using the FTSE Global All Cap Index and Bloomberg Barclays Global Aggregate Bonds. So it's using market cap, a similar scenario S&P 500. The larger companies and the larger companies that have debt and countries with debt would be a larger constituent in the overall planning that we're doing here. So if you have a country or a company with tons and tons and tons and tons of debt, it's going to represent bigger portion of the overall bond portfolio in a global bond portfolio. If you have Amazon or Apple versus Joe Schmo cigar shop, Amazon and Apple are going to represent a significant portion of the overall global bond stock index relative to Joe Schmo's cigar shop, because Joe Schmo's cigar shop is very, very tiny. That's market cap. The bigger the market cap, the more proportionally that constituent represents in the overall portfolio. Hope that makes sense. That means it's more top heavy. There's just no other way around it. When it comes to debt, bonds, that means it's more heavy on the firms and countries that have the most debt, which has always been a kind of a pet peeve of mine. All right, so let's talk about what they're saying. Over 10 years, a 50-50 of global bonds and global equities, they're expecting only a 4% real rate of return. That's not much, and that is after inflation. And actually, I'm not sure what they're using for inflation. We'll just say 3. I think it's 2.5 to 3. Let's just say 2.5. So they're basically saying that after inflation, you're only going to get about 4%. Their projections over the next 10 years, and about 4.5 to it's roughly 4.5 to about 5. Yeah, probably 4.5 to 5 over 20 on a 50-50 global portfolio of stocks and bonds. If you're banking on the old days of 8%, I'd ask you to think again. You're not, I'm not saying you're not going to get it. The likelihood of you getting it are minute. Now, there is some optimistic, so they're using optimistic, pessimistic, and middle. So if we do get optimistic rates, you could easily get 8 to 10% for sure. Look at that under optimistic scenarios. But here's the problem. To be optimistic with the PE ratios as high as they are currently today, the price earnings, evaluations, you're going to have to be real optimistic. It's one thing to be optimistic when the valuations are down in the floor. It's another thing to be overly optimistic when valuations are quite high as they are. So just keep that in the back of your mind. On the bond side, to be optimistic, I don't know where you're getting at, is one thing to be optimistic when the interest rates are sky high and the price of bonds really only have one way to go, which is down. It's another thing to be optimistic when the interest rates are incredibly low, which means inherently the price of bonds are incredibly high. And there's really only one way for the price of bonds to go, which is down, and the yields to go up. That's not an optimistic scenario by any stretch of the imagination. So high valuations on bonds, high valuations on stocks. You're going to have to, I'm not a nervous Nelly, but you're going to have to convince me there's a reason to be optimistic. In this stage, I would defer to this right here, or default to central, which is saying basically 4% net rate of return, or real rate of return, if you will, after inflation, maybe 5% after inflation over 20, and again, 4% for 10. I think that makes sense to me. All right, so let's go down. I think they do say inflation can erode the purchasing power over time, resulting in a lower real portfolio balance that an investor may have planned for. And again, this does include the inflation adjustment. So it is a real rate of return adjusting for inflation. Obviously, we have to make a lot of assumptions. What is the inflation rate we're projecting? Will that come to fruition? Will it be higher? Will it be lower? It's anyone's guess. But if you're using like a 10% inflation, that's too pessimistic. If you're not using any inflation, that's silly. But at the end of the day, 3% is a good point to start with. 2.5 to 3. I don't have any problem with that at all. All right. What I do want to show everyone and their mom, though, is talk about health risk. Health risk encompasses both the risk of needing care because of deteriorating health and the risk of not being able to afford it because of lack of insurance coverage or financial resources. I hear all the time, the biggest thing that's going to sink my boat in retirement is health. And it's just not the case. It's not. And here, I'm not saying don't worry about it. I am saying it's just not the case that the vast majority of Americans are going to be doomed to financially destitute because of health risk. Now, things change, but I want to point you out something here. Watch this, because this is going to shock you. I'm telling you right now. Let's see, right here. As self-sufficiency declines, whether because of illness, fragility, or cognitive impairment, an extended stay in a custodial care facility is frequently a part of end-of-life care. This can be one of the largest expenses in retirement, and planning for it is difficult because of uncertainty about how much care we will need. The total cost is largely determined by the length of time. The total cost is largely determined by the length of time in the facility. Tattoo that on your brain, which can be hard to predict. The total cost is determined by the length of time in the facility. According to U.S. Census data by the Center for Retirement Research, 44% of men and 58% of women will likely use the services of a nursing home. All right, so the cost of your health care in retirement, the bulk of it will be determined by the length of time spent in facility. Almost half the men and basically half of Americans, almost half the men and a little bit more than half the women are going to need the services of a nursing home. So you put those two together and you start going, oh my goodness, we're all going to pay. Oh no, we're not going to have any money. And then you read the next sentence. On average, stays are relatively short. 7% of men and 14% of women will require care of more than 3 years. I've been saying this till I'm blue in the face, that the idea that the majority or even close to a plurality of Americans are going to get killed in a nursing home financially is what I'm talking about. Not killed literally, but they're going to die financially destitute in a nursing home is just not there. There's an article in the Journal for Financial Planning probably 6-7 years ago, and I can't remember the specifics, but basically of the people who spend over, it was like $100,000 in a nursing home, only 5% of them spent over $250,000. I can't remember the exact numbers, but that was the people who spent, like I said, up to 6 figures. Of those people, only 5% of them spent well above 6 figures. Yes, we all have a scenario, anecdotal evidence of people who have done that. I get that. But I'm just telling you, the likelihood of it happening so far historical isn't there. It's just not. And I'll never forget that, because everyone is worried about dying destitute in a nursing home. And I'm not saying don't worry about it, but there's a lot of other things to worry about than this. So let me just reiterate. The biggest burden to you for healthcare will be the length of time you stay in a nursing home. Roughly half the people are going to need a nursing home, but the average stays of nursing home are relatively short, and that only 7% of men and 14% of women will require care of more than 3 years. So that means the vast majority of people who even need a nursing home, because remember, only half the people needed a nursing home to begin with. The vast majority of those people are not going to need it for more than 3 years. Just not there. It's just not. So does that mean that will be you? Well, you might be the exception to the rule. But you can't live your life thinking that you're going to be destitute in a nursing home, because we have evidence on top of evidence that the bulk of people just not. I mean, half of them are not even going to need a nursing home. And of those people who do, a vast majority aren't going to need it for very long. That's just a fact. Now, again, I can't beat this in your head enough. That might not be you. That might be you who needs that. And I'm not saying don't plan for it, but I'm just saying let's stop to worry about that. That is critically important. And I think that might be the same guy who wrote the article in the Journal for Financial Planning, Friedberg. I can't remember. That was a wonderful article, though. All right, thirdly, what I want to point out right here, I was just on Quora, and the guy's like, oh, Paul Ryan wants to get rid of Social Security and all that. And I was like, no, he doesn't. The facts are Social Security is not solvent. And if you listen to my podcast from last night with Larry Kotlikoff, and Larry Kotlikoff is not a right-wing, raging right-wing by any stretch of the imagination. It's fundamentally insolvent. No other way around that. Well, why? Because in 1974, you lived 11.7 years in retirement. In 2014, you double that. You lived about 21 years in retirement. So what's happening here is that the age people retire is kind of shrinking to a little bit flatline to shrinking. The length that they're in retirement has gone up. And that's just what's going on. Social Security is basing on this, but yet here's the reality that we're in today. Social Security is not in as world of hurt as Medicare, all right? Medicare is destitute, no other way around that. Medicaid against for poor people, that's even more. But Social Security, this trajectory keeps going up. It's going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. No getting around that, my friends. The length of people in retirement, i.e. drawing Social Security paycheck, has basically doubled over the last 30, 40 years. And it will continue to increase as well. And that's going to be problematic. If you're relying solely on your Social Security payment, we need other assets for sure. So now, one of the easiest ways to go about that is just pay off your debt. If you have no debt, you don't need as much assets because you don't have as much outflow. And that's a big, big concern that I hope people take heed and consideration for sure. Life expectancy, the average, this is someone who's 65 years old today. A single person, their median age is 84. So once you hit 65, there is, 50% chance that you're going to go live above 84 and 50% chance you're going to die before 84. If you're married, there is a 50% chance that your as a joint life expectancy will be 78. But look at that. Your surviving spouse, there is a 50% chance the surviving spouse of a couple married today at 65, who are 65 years old, that your surviving spouse will live until he or she, most likely she, is almost 90 years old. A 50% chance that your surviving spouse will live until she is 90 years old if you're married today and you're both 65 years old. All right. Now that tells us again, that chart right there. People getting older, retiring earlier, getting older, living longer. Not a good recipe for a Social Security system that's already knee deep in the hole. All right. So that just, let me go back to my thing. That's a lot to chomp on, my friends. A lot to chomp on. Let me make myself bigger. You can get Vanguard, I'll link to it in the show notes. But just remember, 3 things to consider, 3 big issues. A, your market return. If you're using the 8 to 10% rate of return that the old days have provided us, I would say think again. Vanguard studies give you optimistic, pessimistic, and average. The average, you're looking at about 4 to 5% real rate of return. That's after inflation in a portfolio of 50-50 with 50% stocks, 50% bonds. That's global oriented, not just domestic, not just overseas, but global. And again, that's market cap weighted. We talked about that before, but that just means the big guys represent a bigger portion of your portfolio than the little guys do. That's just what it means. Number 2, people are living longer. So what it used to be like this is going like that, which means more and more, there's a bigger, what's called a delta, I should say, where it's getting wider and wider gap between when people retire and how long they are retired for. That's an increase of almost 100% over the last 40 years is how much more people are living in retirement. And unfortunately, Social Security hasn't changed with that. In fact, what's even worse is that where it used to be, there are 16 workers for every one beneficiary. Now we're getting down to 3 workers for every one beneficiary, and the fact that that beneficiary is living longer, and on top of that, the beneficiary retired earlier. Not a good place to be. I mean, Social Security, and I mean, in of itself, it's not doomsday, but there's going to be some drastic changes that have got to be done. There's no getting around that. And the trustees have been saying that for years. At some point, the can will not be kicked down the road anymore. At some point, we're not going to be able to say Paul Ryan wants to get rid of Social Security. At some point, both parties are going to have to come to an agreement to fix it. I give Obama credit. He did do some stuff in there to make it a little bit more solvent. It wasn't that much, but hey, more power to him. He did tackle it. We'll see if Trump does it. I don't know. I don't know. It's got to be bipartisan. It's got to be. And at least Obama had the political capital, knowing full well the media wasn't going to hammer him to be able to take that on and at least make some changes that helped it out some. Not enough, but some for sure. The likelihood that you spend a significant amount of time in a nursing home and i.e. destitute yourself is incredibly small. It's small. I would tell you right now, you should probably be more worried to be underinsured on your homeowners. All right. So like we just had an issue with a leaking fridge, and to fix it, you can't see that back there. It cost $20,000, $25,000. Now insurance paid for that, but still it splits at $1,000 deductible. Who knows if my premiums are going to go up? I don't know. I've never filed a claim my homeowners before. But that wasn't cheap. And that was just a fridge that was leaking and basically warped our hardwood floors in the kitchen. That was a big deal. In fact, I'm waiting on the guys to come today to finish this project up. It's a hassle. So the likelihood of a tree falling on your house is much, much more of a concern than of you running out of money in a retirement home. Now, again, that does not mean you throw caution to the wind and go gambling your nursing home savings that you've accumulated. But just please don't get so caught up in that. It's just not worth it. If there's a history of issues, yeah, my goodness, if there's a history of longevity, of Alzheimer's, things of that nature, by all means, you need to deal with that. But if there's not a history of it and we see the numbers out there, just, again, prepare, but don't freak out. Lastly, people are living longer. Again, if you're married today and you're both 65, there's a 50% chance that one of you all, most likely the woman, is going to live until she's 89. That's a pretty significant long term. That means 25 years in retirement if you retire today at 65. You got to be prepared for that. You can put your assets in the markets. That's risky. And you'll probably do, I hate to say probably, I don't know. You could do fine, or you could just take the safer bet and say, I'm always going to need a house. Let's just pay off the mortgage. You're still going to have property taxes. I get that. I'm still going to have utility bills. I get that. But at the end of the day, even if the housing market crashes, you have a place to live. That's just a fact. So from a point on top of, perspective of security, man, I'm a big fan of paying off the debt for sure. Again, I've talked about doing blue in the face. Don't pay off the debt so your house poor, cash poor and your house rich. Don't want that. But man, in terms of the volatility of the markets that we have, paying off the debt will eliminate that monthly outflow, and on top of that, just secures more of this castle that you have. Every man has his castle. Every home is his castle, or something like that. You got to have a place to live, and if you can have it in your own home without paying any more debt to it, that's a good place to be for retirement planning. All right, guys, hope this helps. Thumbs up are always helpful. Vanguard does great work on their stuff. I highly recommend going there and sign up for their stuff that they do. If you have any questions, comments, please put them below. Don't forget to subscribe and share the video with others. I'm telling you, the more you share it, the more YouTube recognizes it. The more you give me a thumbs up, the more YouTube recognizes it, and the more it gets its information out to other people as well. I look forward to seeing you the next time on the Heritage Wealth Planning YouTube channel. Thanks, guys.